So welcome if you're new, and if you're returning, welcome back. It's nice to see some people again. So Adib, are you excited to be talking about some of these like new policies we've been hearing about? And I mean, there's a lot of new information out there.
Yes, so hi everyone, my name is Adib, and today we are gonna cover some very interesting subjects today regarding the work permits and the new rules in Sweden, the policies and everything. This is my first time having the LinkedIn Live, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah, and should we just explain really quick how we ended up deciding to do this LinkedIn Live together while we wait for everyone
absolutely.
to load?
I think that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah, so Adib and I, we ended up sort of speaking to each other. I can't remember who messaged who first, but I had recently saw that he won an appeal with Migrationsverket on a case. And of course, I'm always trying to find out, how do these things happen? What can we learn from it so we can apply it to our own situations? And after we had a meeting together, I just knew that, Adib, you had so much information. I was learning new things from you. So I thought it made sense for us to do this live so that everyone else can hear what you're telling me, because you're so resourceful and knowledgeable.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm very happy that things that we discussed before have been informative. So yeah, basically, I kind of guessed that the first time I came across your profile was, I think it was maybe 1 or 2 years ago. And I got the post you shared on my feed. And I guess the first time I think I contacted you was actually when one of my cases, which was an international student, got a rejection from migration agency, and we were trying to bring this up as an issue, which was very unprecedented. And I think that was the first time we officially talked about the matter, and then you reposted the matter, and then we went to the court. And things got more serious when we successfully could overturn the decision at the migration court, and the applicant got granted. So that was not very long ago. Probably was like 1 or 2 months ago, which was very interesting to me because it was the first time we came across a case that someone who met all the requirements for us, and that was very shocking to me. So, but I'm very happy that today we can proudly say that they are currently in Sweden and proceeding with their studies, which is amazing.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into the session, but I think it's time for us to go ahead and just get started. Can you guys who are listening, I just want to make sure everyone can hear the audio okay, can you leave some sort of reaction or like a thumbs up, just making sure you can hear us okay? Okay, I see some thumbs up. I see a heart. Thank you. Okay, all right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the main topic, and I know some people are still sort of coming in to the meeting. So my name is Amanda Herzog. I'm the founder of Inner Talents in Sweden, and I offer online courses, ebooks, coaching, and other resources to help foreign-born professionals to find career success in Sweden. So if you're curious to learn more about that, you can visit www.innertalentsinSweden.com. So a little bit about how the event works. All discussions will be in English. Participants can join and leave at any time. So if you guys don't want to stay the whole time, you can always catch a recording later on YouTube. This is more of a casual podcast style event, so it's just more for easy listening. Q&A will be available at the end of the event, and questions can only be asked via audio. So if you would like to ask a question at the second half, you can join the queue and we will let you know ahead of time. And then we'll let people in to speak one at a time. And this event is being recorded and it will be published to the Inner Talents in Sweden YouTube channel, usually within a week after the event. So you can reach out to me if you want to have the link to the channel or just check it out. So today I want to invite Adib Hosseini to join us. He is an immigration expert with extensive experience helping professionals and international students to understand the immigration system in Sweden. And today during the LinkedIn Live, he is going to share his expertise with us on Sweden's immigration rules and some of the latest changes that could be impacting those of you who need a visa sponsorship or know someone else who does. So with that being said, Adib, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Amanda. So, my name is Adib Hosseini, and I specialize in business and immigration law. I graduated from Lund University with a master's degree in European business law and immigration. So I have experience working with European international skilled workers and professionals to move and reside within the European Union. So basically, I offer a wide range of different services from assisting the companies for registration, drafting agreements, navigating complex legal requirements, immigration questions and issues, helping those who got a rejection to appeal at the court to overturn the negative decision. And last but not least, I also offer legal services regarding data protection and GDPR.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. So let's just get right into one of the hottest topics right now, which are the new policies that they're coming out with. So for example, the new salary threshold, any policies that are sort of pending and so on. Can you just tell us about that?
Yeah, so basically we have witnessed a gradual change in the requirements for a residence permit in Sweden. As we can see, from the beginning, we saw a change within the immigration policy of Sweden. And this was not only limited to the asylum seeker situations, it also got into the work permits, the student permits, and a lot more. So basically, with a focus on the fact that Sweden is stepping towards having an environment for those who are considered to be skilled workers, the ones with higher salaries, and those who are keen on actually studying in Sweden with a genuine intention to study in Sweden and not to just enter the country. So the rules have been kind of revised and reviewed a couple of times, especially when it comes to the work permits with the minimum requirement for the salaries, and maybe every like from some point in time it actually changed like within a few days, but now it has been just kind of like calming down and things are just going more steadily in comparison to, I don't know, maybe last year.
Okay, so I want to ask you a little bit more about the salary threshold because they've already raised it. They're talking about raising it again. There's actually a lot of pushback from Swedish companies regarding this. So can you tell us a little bit more, just starting with that new policy?
Yeah, basically, so here with the new policy, basically set the requirement for those who are going to hire people in their companies to have a minimum salary for their employees. But the problem is that this minimum salary does not per se make everyone eligible to get the work permit. For example, if you are meeting the minimum requirement, it does not necessarily mean that you're going to get the work permit, because then the salary should also be aligned with the type of work you're doing and what type of role you have. And depending on the education background, it should be proportionate to your educational background. So that is basically what makes it very interesting, because sometimes there are some misunderstandings about the minimum salary requirement, and just by meeting this minimum, it doesn't mean that the person is going to be granted a residence permit.
Mm. Yeah, it's good you mentioned that because even I wasn't totally sure about that. So, for example, what is the minimum salary right now, like the salary threshold that they've decided on?
The salary threshold right now is around 28,000 crowns per month. So if
And
someone is going to, yes.
yes, and I believe that they're going to raise it to 30, they're trying to raise it to 34,000.
Yeah, I've heard there are some announcements that this might even get higher until 34,000 crowns. But until today, nothing has gone enforced
Mm-hmm.
for the minimum salary.
Okay, so if it's 28,000 right now, what you're saying is somebody could be offered that amount by their employer and still be rejected because of other details.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So what you're saying is if somebody has something at 28,000 SEK right now, like let's say that's their salary being offered by an employer, they still might not be approved by Migrationsverket just because of other factors. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So the situation is in a way that for the major applications, this might be sufficient. But depending on the situation and depending on the case and depending on the role that this person is going to take in the company, they might even ask for higher salaries. So
Wow.
it's a bit complex. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can you speak a little bit more about this potential policy change from 3 to 6 months? It supposedly it may not be enforced until 2026, but have you heard anything about this? So let's say someone loses their job, they have about 3 months to find new employment, and they're discussing the possibility of extending to 6 months, which could really apply to a lot of people facing layoffs right now. I mean, we know the Northvolt situation. What do you know about that?
I mean, officially, we haven't received any details on what's going to happen in the future, like an exact number, whether about the working conditions or about the salary minimum. Um, but so far, we have been monitoring the regulations and like the policies to see how we can help our clients in the future to make sure that everyone aligns with these work permit requirements. Because one of the most important things that one should consider is the fact that getting the first work permit is not per se something that you can hold on to, because when it comes to the extension, that's when things get a bit more complicated, because then you have to deal with your employer, and if the minimum salary is raised, then you have to also ask your employer to raise your income, and then you have to have a higher salary in order to get your work permit extended. So I would say it is a bit difficult to expect or to predict what's going to happen in a couple of months, or even in 2026, which is in 2 years. But for now, we know that the requirements for the work permit are pretty much tied into the fact that you have to meet the current minimum salary, and then your employer has to advertise it like before, which is also an interesting part, because when it comes to the collective agreements, then we have a different situation for those companies who have a collective agreement. For those that do not have a collective agreement, we have a different scenario. And then when it comes to the trade unions, I actually came across a couple of interesting articles, because so as many might know, when you want to hire someone and get a work permit for them at migration agency, you have to also get the green light from the trade union that is relevant to that industry. So basically, they have to send the working conditions and the salary and the contract details to the trade unions and ask them whether this meets the good working conditions that is expected for this type of profession. But the interesting thing that I came across in those articles was that with putting this minimum for the salaries in Sweden, then which is the 80% of the median salary that is published by Statistics Sweden, or abbreviation is SCB, you basically kind of like meet these conditions, because the minimum is considered to be, well, not too high, but enough to meet those working conditions that most of the time the trade unions agree with with the process. So I would say maybe right now it's a question whether getting the opinion of the trade union is really necessary or not, because it is actually adding time to the processing time.
So going back to the original question, though, there is discussion about a policy change in terms of how much time people have to find a job after they leave, or maybe they're terminated from a job. So, for example, right now, most people have about 3 months to find new employment and to change their visa status before they would have to basically leave the country. But there are talks about it going from 3 months to 6 months. Do you have any information on this?
Yeah, I have actually heard things about the extension of these 3 months to 6 months. However, what really concerns me is the fact that maybe nobody is talking about those who don't even meet the 3 months opportunity to get a job, because there are some certain terms and conditions that one could potentially get 3 months opportunity to find a new job. For example, these certain people that I'm going to mention are going to be deprived from getting these 3 months as an opportunity to find a new work and secure a new work permit. For example, if someone is in the process of extending their work permit and they haven't received a decision, they are not included in this exception. Or the ones who have not entered Sweden or started their job, they're also not considered in this process. So basically, there are some people who are not considered to be eligible to even prolong their existence in Sweden because of this situation. Or even if someone is actually, for example, let's say someone just got laid off at work and their residence permit is only valid for another 2 months. So they only have another 2 months. They don't have 3 months. So that is also another concern. So even if we extend this 3 months to 6 months, these certain groups are still deprived from extending their work residence permits for another 3 or 6 months, because no matter whether it's 3 or 6, they still don't get it. However, the fact that 3 months would probably not be sufficient for people who are going to secure a new work, it makes sense, because even for those who are actually Swedish citizens with many years of working in Sweden, a lot of experience, a strong network, it is actually difficult even for them to secure a new work within 3 months. So increasing these 3 months to 6 makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and this is something that I have been advocating on for a while now, which is 3 months. Even a native Swede struggles to find a job in 3 months. And statistically speaking, Swedes are actually tend to find a job within 6 months on average. So, and an international job seeker, they take on average about 18 months, and they want to give us about 3 months to try to make this happen. And there have been some arguments that, okay, a lot of other countries require less than 3 months. But if you look at some of the neighboring countries, I'm not entirely sure if I'm correct on this, so don't quote me on it. But I believe it's Denmark and Norway that do offer 6 months. If I'm incorrect about that, it's one of the other nearby countries, but they're offering 6 months. So it really makes you question, why is Sweden not sort of matching what's standard in Scandinavia in the job market? So let's hope that they decide to do this. As I mentioned earlier, it's sort of something in discussion to be implemented around 2026. So I'm not sure it will happen anytime soon, but there have been discussions in the recent media about, let's say, the Northvolt situation. Maybe you can make a quick comment about how Migrationsverket actually posted about this on their pages, which is really rare for them to post about something that's happening specifically to companies, because a lot of people are wondering, do you think they might do something in the short term? Adib, I have to make a quick comment. We can sort of hear you're typing a bit loudly, so if you can just keep the noise level down for us. But yeah, so what are your thoughts about Migrationsverket commenting on this? And do you think they might take some sort of emergency action to like streamline this idea and extend it?
Yeah, sorry, I was making a couple of bullet points here to cover all the things that you mentioned.
Okay.
So basically, the fact that Migrationsverket made a post about people getting laid off at Northvolt was a bit unprecedented because this was something that you actually rarely see. What is very important is the fact that thousands of workers got affected by this event, which was very sad and disappointing. However, the number of people who got affected by this regulation is not just limited to those who were directly employed by Northvolt. It was also affecting third companies who were hiring contractors and workers that were working on this like a mutual project with Northvolt. So they were having agreements and industrial agreements and contracts with Northvolt to do projects. So the scale of people who got affected is increasing as these companies are also losing their projects with Northvolt. So this is very important to consider because a large number of people are now losing their work, which eventually turns into losing their work permits.
I never thought of that perspective that, you know, there are projects that are tied to Northvolt and there are other companies doing layoffs. I know that because I've been getting messages from people asking about it from a range of different companies. So Northvolt seems to be in the media, but it's happening to a lot of people. That's why I thought, you know, we should have this discussion. But do you think it's possible that Migrationsverket, because they did something so unprecedented by posting about this, that they might take it a step further and maybe consider changing the policy from 3 to 6 months now instead of 2026?
So basically, even though Migrationsverket made an announcement about this event, it was, in my experience and from my perspective, more like a clarification of the situation to just help people getting access to the information. So basically, since the number of people who were affected was very large, probably Migrationsverket received a lot of calls, a lot of emails. Even we were trying to follow up on a work permit case, and we noticed that the work permit section telephone number was just out of access, so we couldn't even reach Migrationsverket, which makes sense because they received a large number of emails and calls because the thing just happened very suddenly. So I would say this post or announcement was more like an announcement for making sure people get access to the right information, to know what the rules are going to apply when you lose your job, rather than a kind of announcement for changing the policy in the future. Because like the migration agency is not in the legal stance or position of changing the rules, so they usually just follow what legislators send or publish to them, which is the parliament and the other legislature bodies in Sweden. So I'm afraid this post would not necessarily make a change in the future, but it can potentially affect the policy. And the policy is something that we can look forward to, because when we see a problem, then we should look for a solution. And of course, in Sweden, those who are dealing with the immigration law are aware of this problem, and hopefully they're going to do something about it. But I'm afraid this is not something that would probably happen in Sweden, as it takes time for any sort of legal change in Sweden. It takes at least a couple of months. So I don't think if you're gonna get any quick updates on that.
Now, I do want to talk about this just like a tiny bit more, and maybe like bring up some kind of hopeful thinking here, but I was in Sweden. I was living and working in Sweden when COVID happened, and I remember that they made some emergency decisions. By they, I mean, the government entities and so on. So it's a bit more of a vague statement. But what happened was they actually changed a lot of things temporarily. So, for example, I think they changed it from like if you were working for, you had to work for 12 months in order to be considered eligible for ACASA benefits to a certain level. And they kind of reduced it down to, I believe it was only 3 months, or they highly reduced it. And they also extended the amount of time and that you could receive benefits, things like that. But it was only temporary. It was only for about, I believe, somewhere between 1 and 2 years, and then it kind of went back again. So I think you mentioned something smart here, which is Mietspiegel doesn't really make the rules. They just sort of follow the rules. But I also remember that they changed the salary threshold law within like 3 months. It just sort of happened within a very, what I believe was a short amount of time, because people didn't have enough time to prepare. Companies couldn't prepare. People were, suddenly having to leave Sweden. So maybe, is that like hopeful thinking on my side, that maybe there's a potential that the right people in government will kind of hear the call for this to happen, especially since the media has been covering this?
We saw the situation with the COVID, which was, yes, you are right about that. Or even when we had the problem with the Ukraine war, we also saw like a change in the policy regarding the asylum seekers and those who were coming from Ukraine. They had a different system applied to them in comparison to the ones who were from other countries. However, this is very important to consider, that to what extent this problem is going to push the rules in a way that we see like tangible changes, because it is like before making any changes to the rules, the legislator usually thinks about, okay, who is the subject of this rule, and how am I going to affect them, and how this change is going to affect the others. So let's say Northvolt is laying off their employers, and then because of that, since the number is very large, should we change the rules in a way that affects other workers that are working for other companies, or not? We just gonna make an exception only for those who are working with Northvolt, or does this also affect the ones who lost their jobs, who were working for third companies who had projects with Northvolt? So it is always very important to consider, like, what is the scope of the change, and how this is gonna affect people in the future. And this takes time, because these certain things affect a lot of cases in another way. So, and about the quick change of the threshold or with the salaries for the workers, I would say that was also resulting from a previous change in the immigration law. So yes, things changed with the salary, but it was like a result of a previous change of the immigration rules, that they set the salary, set the policy first, and then made an amendment to the original rules. And then when it came to the details, the scope of their autonomy and the authority to change the minimum salary was also available to them. So that is why we saw that the change in the salary was happening very quickly. Another example could be the situation for the PhD students, when they were, like, usually they were in the previous rules, they used to just get the permanent residence permit automatically after they were finishing their program as a PhD students. But then very suddenly things changed. But then making other revisions to this rule took at least a couple of months. So in my experience with these type of situations, it is very difficult to make a certain amendment or make a very quick solution in a short time, like 3 months. I would really be happy to be more optimistic about the situation, but I'm afraid the situation is not in a way that we can make huge decisions in a very short time. That's how I see the situation, which is really sad, I'm afraid.
Mm. Well, thanks for sharing your knowledge on this. I guess we'll just have to see how things sort of play out, at least over the next year or so. But just kind of expanding a little bit more on the topic, since we're talking about Migrationsverket, can you give us a little insight into, like, what is the internal communication process like with case officers? I think we were discussing, like, there's official rules and then there's sort of like an unofficial kind of just way that they operate. Can you give us a little insight, what you know about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me explain the process of processing a case at Migrationsverket. So basically, when you submit a case, they usually look into how complete your application is, whether you fulfilled all the requirements, if you submit all the required documents, if everything is in order, which is going to affect also the processing time and also the quality of taking your case into consideration. And from this perspective, we see that migration agencies' administrative system is in a way that we have a case officer, which is the handläggare, and then we have someone like more like a supervisor, which is taking care of a couple of cases with the case officers, which is the team leader or the team leader or the supervisor, and then we have the beslutsfattare, which is the one who is making the decisions on the applications. So basically, each case might even go through a couple of different analyses based on the situation of the case, whether this is a work permit case, or if it's a student case, or if it's a family case. So it varies from center to center which type of case you're sending to migration agency. And about the fact that in some cases you might see even 5-6 case officers checking the application, which is very interesting, because usually people think that there is only one case officer and you have to just communicate with that person. However, maybe this case officer is on holidays. Maybe they get like a sick leave. Maybe they get parental leave, or maybe they just are not available at the moment. But there are actually other case officers working in their case. Even though the assigned case officer is someone else, it doesn't prevent the other case officers or the supervisor to take into a look into your case and making a decision on it. But when it comes to work permit cases, it usually has like as let's say niche type of process, because first you make the application, like the employer actually, or the agent on behalf of the employer, and then the job had to be advertised previously, and then you have to send this to the trade union, and then the case officer takes a look into the case, and if everything is good, and if you are not one of those unlucky people who got stuck with a raise in the minimum salary, for example, let's say right now it's 28,480 crowns, if I'm not wrong. So let's say you just submit the case, and then while they're in the processing time, or like in the process of making a decision in your case, let's say this minimum got like raised to 34,000 crowns, then this person is very unlucky, because then you have to make an amendment and revise the contract and just make sure that you like the numbers correspond to what the minimum requirement is. So one of the biggest problems is that sometimes people think just because they submitted their case before this change of requirement, then they're good to go, but they're not. So they have to make sure that they are the ones who are responsible for their own cases. So your employer has to make an amendment to the contract, change the salary. For example, right now, salary is, I think, until 1st of November. So until 1st of November, you're good to go. But after responsibility to make sure that all the requirements are met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lot of information. I can sort of feel the questions coming from some people who are listening. Like, if you guys have like questions about how this internal process works at Migrationsverket, can you just show me like some kind of reaction in the chat, just so I know I should cover it a little bit more in the future? But with that being said, we're going to get into the Q&A a little bit later, so you'll be able to ask that question directly. I do see some responses. I know that I've been curious in the early days, like who do I reach out to get a direct response, questions like that. But let's go ahead and move the conversation into the area of the appeal. You said that you successfully appealed a case, which honestly is quite hard to do in Sweden. And that was one of the original reasons why I sort of reached out to you. So I would just like to hear a little bit more about like how that sort of happened, and give us also a little bit more insight into like what someone listening, like if they think they might be facing a rejection, or if they have one already, like how can they take this example of the appeal that you managed to successfully do, and how could they turn their rejection into something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is very interesting to consider that everyone who gets a rejection in Sweden, no matter what type of residence permit they applied for, they always have the right to take the case to the court and appeal the decision. This gives everyone the right to have a fair trial, make a mistake, and to make sure that they are not being deprived from their fundamental rights in Sweden. And appealing the case secure about your like if you are completely sure that you have met all the requirements and all the documents were submitted and everything was fulfilled, then you can just make a formal appeal, send it to the court by post or digitally, depending on the type of the case, because usually when you get the rejection, the last page of the decision explains how you can appeal the decision. And usually you can appeal the decision for like you have 3 weeks to appeal the decision, but you should always check the last page of the decision to just see how much time you have to do so. And then it varies from case to case how you can have a successful appeal, because only because you're appealing the decision, it does not mean that you're going to overturn the decision. Because, like, just because you're taking the case to the court, it does not guarantee anything. You have to make sure that you make your arguments in the right way. You have to find what went wrong with your application that caused the rejection, whether it was just a misunderstanding, whether it was just not taking the documents or the information you provided properly into consideration, whether is going to give you the plan of how to just escalate your arguments and send the appeal to the court. So as long as you don't understand, probably the first and then part is court. So basically, we received two clients who got a rejection from migration agency for student permits. Student permits usually have a very straightforward kind of situation. So if you got admitted to a university in Sweden and you paid the tuition fees, if you are supposed to pay it and you don't have a scholarship, and then if you have the bank assets or the financial support, and if you meet all these requirements, you should normally receive the residence permit. But what was very interesting in this case, they actually met every single requirement for a student permit, but they got rejected because they had an interview at the embassy, and the staff at the embassy thought that these people don't have enough intention, like a genuine intention to study in Sweden. And based on their report, the case officer at migration agency rejected their applications. So by taking a very quick look into their cases, I just realized that this is something that is worth taking to the court and just making sure that you're going to make sure that these people get their residence permit, because everything was clear that they haven't really made any wrong decisions, or they haven't really sent a wrong document to the migration agency. Everything was just fine. But then when we made the appeal, and then when we submitted to the court, I actually tried to contact the lawyers at those universities, but I haven't really gotten a clear answer whether they're willing to make a point on that, or if they want to contribute anything, because it was very unprecedented. They didn't even have a similar case where they got like rejections with that. Another problem was that even if you take these type of applications or rejections to the court, usually the processing time take a long time, which makes it very difficult to make them ready to start their program in time, because they usually miss the arrival day, and it's just too late to start the program. In that situation, it was very tricky because we took it to the court, and then we overturned the decision, and then we had to make like the national visa application at the embassy so that they can make it to Sweden in time. So it was a lot of, let's say, last minute work that we did in order to make sure they arrive on time and start their programs. But the argument that we made during the appeal to the court was the fact that we have to make we have to make it clear what are the requirements an applicant has to meet, and what is considered to be policy, what is considered to be a personal approach by the case officer, because like rules should be clear and equal, so everyone should be treated similarly and equally when it comes to the rules and legislations. So when we put okay, it's a bit tricky with family permits. I'm gonna say that in detail later. But everyone should be treated the same way. That's why we put the rules. If we're going to have different results for different yeah. In a way that they said, we believe that these people don't have the genuine intent of receiving some extra letters from the the chance to prove our point to the court, and then the court said, well, since these applicants met all the requirements and there are nothing contrary to the rules here, we believe that these people are just eligible to receive the residence permit. And it's very interesting because one of these cases got directly granted the residence permit by the court, and it didn't even get involved with the migration agency, because usually the court sends the decision down to migration agency, and then migration agency makes a new decision. But this time we saw like the court immediately and without the intervention of migration agency granted the person. And when we called the migration agency and the embassy, they didn't even know how to grant this person a residence permit because they haven't seen something like this before, which was very interesting to me because even I didn't see something like that before. It is very unprecedented and very, very rare that the court grants someone a residence permit right into the decision that they issue afterwards, which was very interesting to me. So when we went to the embassy, they didn't accept the court's decision because they were like, well, we don't have a format to receive a decision from the court and then issue a visa. Then you have to go through the migration agency. So anyway, long story short, we had the opportunity to take the cases to the court and successfully defend the arguments, and then we got granted. So what am I trying to say here is that if you believe that your case got rejected, even though you fulfilled all the requirements, don't panic. Just go fight for what you think you should receive, and it is always worth trying. And
Hi, Adib, are you still with us?
yes, can you hear?
I'm having a little bit of connection issues. I'm having a little bit of connection issues.
For your problem, even though sometimes you have to make tough decisions, but it doesn't mean that it is the end of the road. So you always should have to consider alternatives and plan A's. If the plan A is not working, then plan B, and then you should always look for extra solutions and alternatives.
Hi, I've returned. I apologize, everyone. There was some sort of a connection issue. But yes, let's continue the conversation into one of the main topics that we wanted to talk about, which is what to do if you're facing a layoff. So we know the Northvolt situation. There's a lot of other things. Like, what can you recommend for people, especially from like a work permit point of view? I know we also got some questions about this in the questionnaire. So can you just like give us some guidance on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, could you mute your? I cannot get my own voice. Okay, wonderful. So yeah, about the layoffs, that was very unfortunate. I was very sad when I received the letters from people who were writing to me and emailing me about their situation. So to be honest, even I was shocked because Northvolt was such a promising company with a lot of employees. People were very eager to go work there. A lot of people got, I helped a lot of people getting their work permits when they were looking for a job in Sweden, even though I was not maybe directly involved in the work permit process, but I received a lot of calls and emails and consultation sessions with them. They were asking about the requirements, the work permit conditions. So it was very sad to see the same very people reaching out to me again in a very desperate way, that they got affected by these layoffs, which was very unfortunate. But I mean, in these situations, there is a moment of grief, but afterwards we have to just make sure that we find the solution. So to me, I believe those who are working, or they were working for Northvolt, they have a couple of alternatives or solutions that they should take into consideration depending on their situation. Because to me, it is not the rules or the opportunities that apply to people. It is the people who are the ones who we should find the right solutions to them based on their personal situation. So if we have someone who was graduated in Sweden, they might have a different scenario from someone who was not graduated in Sweden from college or university. If someone is here with family, they might not be in the same position with someone who is single. So it is always good to consider that what is the best option for me in my situation, rather than what is the best solution for everyone. So that is something I should bring up here, because it's always good to consult with a lawyer or someone who is an expert in this area, who can help you and show you the way and tailor the solution to your type of position or for your type of problem. So to me, I believe those who are affected by these recent events at Northvolt are divided into certain groups. So, for example, we have some people who were students before starting working at Northvolt. So these people, usually they are graduated from a Swedish university, and by finishing their studies in Sweden, they receive a job seeking visa for a year where they can look for a job or start their own business. But if they switched their student permit to the work permit directly without going through the job seeking process, what happens to them? Or if someone was already on the job seeking permit and then they switch to the work permit afterwards, or what happens to the ones who directly came to Sweden on work permits, or what happens to those who had a work permit for 2 years and then they were in the processing time. So all of these scenarios varies, even though all of them were employed by Northvolt, but we cannot treat their situation in the same way because they're different people from different backgrounds with different situations. So if there is any questions about, or if you would rather start with a certain group, I would be more than happy to start with that. Which group do you think we can start with?
I think we should maybe start moving into the Q&A so we can see what everyone is affected in, if they might maybe be in one of these groups, or they want to like kind of start us off on an example. But at some point, I also want us to just really briefly talk about something that was really highly requested, which is policies on starting your own company in Sweden, because a lot of people will not meet this 3-month rule to find another job. Let's be honest, like there might not even be enough jobs, or it's a very long process to get hired. And I know that some people consider, let's say, starting their own company. So what do you recommend for people who are thinking of going this route? And for anyone who's curious, I went this route. I started my own company, and I believe you did as well, Adib. So can you give people like some information on this from like a permit point of view? Before, and then
Yeah, absolutely.
and then we're going to go into the Q&A, everyone. So go ahead and start joining the queue, and we can start talking about some of these case examples you mentioned.
All right. Sounds good to me. So, so briefly, if I want to explain the situation from residence permit situation, permit-wise, I would say if you currently have a valid work permit, then you basically have the right to switch your residence permit to another type. So in some situations, it could be a bit difficult because sometimes when you switch your residence permit, then you have to leave the country and make the application from outside Sweden. But in some cases, which similar to this scenario, where someone has a valid work permit in Sweden, and then they are looking forward to switch this residence permit to a self-employed residence permit, then it's fine. Because as long as you have a valid residence permit in Sweden for work, you can make an application for a self-employed residence permit without the need to leave the country. However, this is like the general situation. You should always consider that it could be different for some scenarios for people. So it is not something that I can say it's 100% for everyone. But as a general rule, you should probably be fine with switching from work permit to self-employed, which I guess Amanda kind of like had a similar situation in the past with switching the work permits experience. But I would say it is usually fine if you want to switch your residence permit from work to self-employed, you're good to go. But okay, let's get into more details about what self-employed residence permit is. So basically, imagine that someone registers a company in Sweden, and it doesn't matter what type of company you register. You can register an enskild firma, which is like more like a personal company. You can register handelsbolag, which is like you need two people to register this type, or you can just register a limited liability company with having shares in the corporate, like the aktiebolag or the AB. So these are the three common companies people register in Sweden, and you can just register any of these three. And to be honest, there is no difference. So permit-wise, it doesn't matter what group of what type of company you register. So it's not like we say if you don't register AB, you have a lower chance of getting the residence permit. Enskild firma, the personal company, handelsbolag or aktiebolag, all have the opportunity to get the residence permit. So don't be very picky. Just choose the one and stick to it that suits the type of business you're going to conduct in the future. And then what do I need to register a company in Sweden? So basically, first of all, it is very interesting to know that it's very difficult to register a company without a Swedish personal number. So it's the first step to get to register your own company. However, there's some scenarios that you can maybe register without having a personal number, but it's very complicated and usually just takes a long time. So I do recommend people to register when they have a personal number. But if you don't have a personal number, there is also a situation where you can still register your own company. And then you have to make sure that you have enough financial support for the period you're going to register your company and start having a business in Sweden. Because when you start a company, maybe you already have clients, maybe you already have made some cooperation contracts, maybe you have projects for the future, but this is difficult to make sure that you're going to secure a minimum salary for the future to cover your expenses and the cost of living in Sweden. Therefore, that is why migration agency asks the applicant to have 200,000 krones
bank assets. So you should have to take this into consideration that when we talk about this amount, we mean to have it available in your bank account. So if you have stocks or if you have it in, like, I don't know, gold plate or anything, that doesn't count. So it should be something that you have direct access to it, and it's something that is liquid. So basically, you have to usually have this in your bank account, and it shouldn't be like it shouldn't be freezed. So frozen assets are also not acceptable. So it should be available and accessible. So both available and accessible. And then the other part is, if you have family, then you have to have half of this amount for your wife and 25% of it for every kid. So let's say someone has a wife and one child, then they have to have 350,000 crowns in their bank account to be to get the residence permit as a self-employed. And then you usually have to also go into tax processes, because your company needs to be registered with the tax authorities, which is the Skatteverket in Sweden. So once you have to register your company with Bolagsverket, which is also it happens on there. Have a platform for it, which is called Verksamt. So you go to Verksamt, you have to register the company there, and then you have Skatteverket, which you have to register for the tax related things. And then you have to have a business plan. What you're going to do in Sweden, what are the activities, what is the market, and what are your plans for the upcoming 2 years is something that you have to come up with in a different document. So you have to make sure that you have enough projects or you have enough plans for it. If you are a startup, that's a different story. If you, I don't know, bought a restaurant or you just started a restaurant or a cafe, that's a different story. So depending on the industry and type of activities you're going to do, you have to have a different type of business plan. And then the last but not least is the location. So let's say someone is conducting business with clients or customers that have to be present, like they come to your office in person, and then you do business together. Then you have to have like a registered office. You have to show like you have rented an office or a proper location. But some people, they just work remotely, they work from home. And then they probably don't need to have that, but you still have to make sure that you don't get involved with other stuff. For example, you have to register an internet subscription for a company. If you are consuming too much electricity, you have to make sure that you get a different contract for that. So these are the things you have to take into consideration. It's a long list depending on what type of business you're going to register, but just make sure that you won't make any complicated mistakes, because just not knowing about the rules doesn't give you the opportunity to get away. So if you make mistakes and if it's illegal or if it's not completely aligned with the rules, you would probably end up being in trouble. So just try to, about the financial parts, about the accounting parts and the tax related things, usually be in contact with an accountant regarding the regulations and rules. Try to reach out to lawyers. And depending on the need you have in the company, you might even need to talk to business consultants. And there are some people in the industry that you are going to have the business with. And you can even talk to people who were in the similar situation. So it's usually good to use their experience and take advantage of the job market in Sweden. So these all are the things that I believe everyone who wants to switch to self-employed permit should take into consideration at the first place. But then, as the business grows, then the problem grows as well. So you have to make sure that you always keep updated and make sure that you keep monitoring the regulations and the things that applies to your business and to yourself to make sure that you will end up getting your permanent residence permit once you finish the first 2 years. You have to submit your application for an extension, and at the same time, you can also submit the permanent residency application.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of information, but I know that it's definitely a possibility if you need to consider, like, maybe you're facing a layoff or you want to leave your job and you're concerned about not finding something in the next 3 months. You could start your own company, let's say, as a consultant. So, for example, I worked in marketing at a full-time position, and then I went into a marketing consultant position as a self-employed. So if there's anyone here listening and you want more information, you can message Adib directly on LinkedIn, and he can share his consultation link with you. So you can start off with 15 minutes and just ask him, like, what do I need to do to go from here to there? And that's not just with self-employed, but any of these questions. That's why we have him here today, is to offer him as a resource. So let's go ahead and get into the Q&A. So I know we have somebody who's waiting here, but if you wanted to ask a question, go ahead and join the queue, and we'll be answering it in the order that people are sort of lining up. I just saw someone drop out of the queue who's been there for a while, so if you want to join back in, we'll get you next. Oh, he just joined back. I'm going to go ahead and I think this was, do you remember the name? Was it Shalika? Is that the one who just joined? I think it was him, so I'll go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, you're in the box.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Hello. Hello, both of you and people listening. Thank you for conducting this session.
Adib, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Just the voice is echoing.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Go ahead and continue. I'll mute myself.
Okay. I'm Shalika. I'm also currently employed at Northolt. And I have a question that is concerned for many of us working here. We were students who have completed our 2-year master's program in Sweden. And we didn't apply for job seeking visa. We directly applied for the first work permit. And now we are pending for the first work permit decision. And what will happen if they lay us off? Should we leave the country immediately, or should we wait for a decision from migration worker?
So I'm going to directly answer the question. So depending on the case, it could be different because let's consider this scenario. Someone is a student and then they directly apply for a work permit. If they were not granted a work permit and they had an ongoing case at migration agency, as long as they submit their next residence permit application while the case is ongoing and there is no gap between the process, you can apply for other categories of residence permit in Sweden. So let's say you are eligible for job seeking visa in Sweden and you have an ongoing work permit application. If you were not rejected and your case is still pending, it means that you still have the opportunity to submit a different residence permit application. But I mean, you should always be careful, because if there is a gap, then you have to, then you're in trouble, because that's not good news. There should be no gap between the end of when your previous residence permit was expired. There should be no gap when you want to apply for the next permit. But if there is a gap, then you're not eligible. But if there is no gap, then you are eligible. Did that answer your question, or?
Yeah, one more thing. Actually, you mean the previous residence permit mean the study permit, right?
Yes, if you had a student permit previously, like if the last residence permit you had, the latest one was based on studies, and you applied for the next residence permit right before your student permit expire, which I assume it was the work permit.
Yeah.
If the case is still not rejected and if it's still pending, it means there is still the opportunity of applying for the job seeking visa.
Okay. Thank you very much. That explains everything. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
So do we have more questions? I see some hands raised here.
I'm going to bring Artavan into the box.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
Beautiful.
I can hear you.
So, first of all, thanks for the information. Quite interesting, and especially since I ran into an issue with migration agency very recently, I just realized anything they have on their website is just like the tip of the iceberg, and there's like a whole different sort of dark web inside it that all the laws and regulations are there. So basically, that was interesting to figure out. But I'm going to give a quick background so you have an easier time understanding it. And then I had two questions. So I came here for my studies, and before my studies finished, I had to extend my residence permit for studies. But the thing was, before I received the decision on my extension, my education was over, so I graduated. So what I did was to ask Migrationsverket if I can switch the application to a job seeker permit. They were like, okay. And they did it. But after a few months passed, they sent me a message, or let's say a letter. And it was not a decision letter, but the case officer was clearly saying that I'm not going to give you this permit because of some reasons. So what I did was I switched that application into a self-employment application, which they were also cool with it. So this is like a very, very basic, like the bare bones of what the background is. So there are two questions now. One is there any, because with with the job permit or the work permit, you need to earn like at least 28,000, like you have a minimum salary. But I was just wondering if such a thing also applies to self-employment as well. And like, are they looking for any specific amount that you earn in your business plan? Because you have to provide the business plan, or at least I did. And are they looking for any specific amount of money, or like if you show some contracts and like stuff that you know your craft, that is good enough? And the second question I had is regarding the work permit. And I was wondering imagine if someone has two jobs and the sum of the salaries would match the minimum salary. Imagine if it's 28,000 or it's like 32K. Would they be eligible to get the work permit or not? Or if you have any thoughts on that, because that's it.
Thank you, Erdogan. Very, very interesting questions you asked. So to answer the first question, so for the first 2 years, there is no set amount of saying, for example, how much assets or financial support you should have or show for your business, which is an interesting part, because depending on the business, you might need to show different types of financial proof for that. So one part, we have to divide the financial means into two sections. The first section is the 200,000 crowns that one should show in order to prove that they can take care of their own costs as a person who's living in Sweden. And then the second section is the amount of money one should show to prove that they can take care of the costs of activities this business is going to handle in the future, because businesses have costs, and usually when there is this newly registered business, they usually don't have a high turnover. So it's usually important to make sure that this company or this type of business has enough financial means to cover their expenses as a business conductor. So I would recommend that you just make sure that you have that 200,000 crowns for yourself as a person, and then you talk to an accountant who is working with that specific activities, because accountants are the ones who are usually taking care of the financial part of the companies, and they are quite familiar with different industries because of their activities, and they usually give you maybe not an exact number, but usually like an estimation of how much a company in the size of yours is going to make, and how much cost they have, which is also a rough number, so it's usually not exact. But if your question is about whether migration agency is going to say this is the amount of financial means or money that one should have for their company, no, there is no set amount for it. So the evaluation of this part varies from one application to the other. And when it comes to the second question about having to work, unfortunately, that is even practically not possible, because when we as lawyers or agents of the companies, or even the company themselves, apply for a work permit for their employees, there is no way of making the application by two companies or two agents at the same time for two different types of work. So, and you can't also have two different applications for two type of work at the same time. So basically, that is why you need to have one job which meets the minimum salary requirements for one residence permit application, and it's not possible to add up the amount by working in different sectors. However, as a self-employed, there is no. This was the previous answer was for the work permit as employees, but for those who are like self-employed, you are bound to the activities you are going to have to do in your own company, and you're not allowed to be employed by others. However, your company can have contracts and activities with other companies as a business and not as a person. So you're pretty much tied to your own company, and if you want to work with other companies, you have to do it in the scale of company to company, like business to business, B2B cooperation and agreements, rather than the employer and employee type of relationship.
Understood. So, sorry, I don't want to take too much time of others, but I think like these questions, because it is good to ask, especially for those who will start to go through the path of self-employment. So, one set of question is about the financial means of the company. You mentioned that you have to show that you have 20,000 crowns to support your own, and then like a little bit more to cover the cost of the company. So the form I applied was like as a freelance creative kind of person. So it is not like a business that creates a product. So technically speaking, the only cost is my laptop and my headphone, which I already have. So basically no cost for the company. I mean, of course, there are some stuff that I have to pay for, but I mean, I don't think that will be an issue. So I've shown that. The thing is, I don't know if that influences anything or not, but the thing is, when you're talking about you're not allowed to be hired by anyone else, do you mean that, imagine if I got the self-employment permit, am I able to work part-time, like, I mean, anything in McDonald's or whatever? Is that legally possible or no? Any income that I earn should be through my company, and I'm not able to be employed anywhere else. And the second question being, excuse me, I just forgot it. Oh yeah. So when I applied for the visa for the self-employment permit, I did not have my company because Skoda requires you to have a residence permit card. And as I explained before, I applied when my residence permit was still like going on, but it expired a few weeks afterwards. So I couldn't really create my own company. Does that make any difference, or they are not really looking into that, and then I can just start the company when I got the permit?
So to quickly answer your questions, the first part with the fact that you have to show that you can provide for your own company and then cover the costs, as I mentioned before, it varies from one business to another. So basically, if your type of business does not, like, it's not like a restaurant, okay, so, or it's not like a factory, or it's not like a workshop, so it's a different type of business. Therefore, it needs different types of evaluation. So I would say it's usually good to just stick to the business plan, depending on your business plan. For example, if your business plan says that you have like a home office, then you have to just basically show that you can cover the cost of internet, electricity. If you are using specific type of applications or softwares, then you can just take care of the subscription fees. So these are the things that you have to tailor for your own business plan. Which I recommend if you need extra help, get help from the experts who are doing with that and helping with that. And about the type of work you can do, so imagine that hypothetically you receive your residence permit card and the residence permit letter for the self-employed. It clearly on the paper mentions that this residence permit is tied to this company and to this type of activities. So you do not have the right to work anywhere else other than your own company under any sort of circumstance. So there are no way you can work for anyone else or for anyone, any other companies, part-time, whether part-time or full-time or in any sort of shape of employment. And you're pretty much tied to your own company. So you can only also conduct business with other companies depending on what type of activities you mentioned in your application. Because then in your decision letter, it also mentions that, okay, you have, for example, let's say someone has, I don't know, like their company's name is like Alpha. And then the business activities that Alpha is going to have and the services they're going to provide are like X and Z. Then you are pretty much tied to Alpha company and the activities you're going to handle are just X and Z. So I think that might answer your question regarding the activities you can have. So no, I'm afraid you're not allowed to work even part-time at McDonald's or any other company. And about the last question, it is a bit. I'm not sure about whether someone needs to have a valid residence permit in order to get like the Skatteverket's registration. This is not very common because usually our clients didn't have a problem with registering at the tax agency for their companies. But I would say that you should be very cautious with registering for or submitting your application for a residence permit as a self-employed because maybe 1 or 2 years ago migration agency did not consider the cases in the beginning, but right now when you submit the application, we have seen situations where there was a case officer that was actually looking into the documents to see that you have fulfilled everything and you haven't just submitted an application to buy extra time. So you should be very cautious with that to make sure that you fulfill all the requirements and you have submitted all the required documents. And another way for those who have a similar issue with Skatteverket, you can always reach out to Bolagsverket and Verksamt and register your company there. However, you should also take the processing time into consideration because when you want to register a company, it usually has a processing time as well. And if you only have 2 or 3 months left to switch your residence permit, then you should be very quick with that because then you're going to miss time and Bolagsverket is going to face huge number of applications soon who are going to switch the residence permits from work permit to self-employed. I think I've covered the questions, but if there are any other questions or any other person who wants to come up, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have our next question.
Hi. First of all, Amanda, it's really great to host this event, and Adib, thanks for your time and providing very valuable information at the right time. I have 2 questions. Mostly these are the questions that are little difficult to find the information on online forums and even on the migration agency website. So the first question is, we all know that we have 3 months to find a job if we lose a job while we are on work permit. And that too, if we have a valid residence permit, maybe beyond 3 months. but could not find the information what exactly happens if one could not find the job in 3 months. The migration agency website says you have to leave, but even I contacted migration agency on the same. They said they gave some diplomatic answers, not straightforward answer that your work permit will be revoked, can be revoked, things like that. But they didn't make it very clear that you must leave Sweden on the first day of after 3 months or something like that. So, in your experience as an immigration lawyer, did you anytime face any case where someone lost job, maybe found job after 3 months, not in 3 months, but after 3 months, maybe 4 months, 3.5 months, something like that? Were they given the residence permit or work permit after that if they applied? Any kind of residence permit, maybe business or work permit or anything. So that was my first question about the 3 months deadline. Mainly, what exactly happens if someone finds job after 3 months? And the second question is about, let's say, the North Field case. A lot of people got laid off, but their spouses might be working. So in that case, if the main applicant wants to become a dependent and the spouse wants to apply for the visa if their employer is ready, do they have to leave the country? Because the spouse work permit may be for the first time. Is it mandatory to leave the country and apply for the work permit? Because I heard there are chances if you have been living for more than 3 years or 4 years, or the spouse has been working for a long time, migration agency will consider you to stay here and switch from main to dependent and grant the permit so you can continue to stay. So these are the two questions.
Thank you for your questions. They're actually very interesting. So about the first question, if you are a non-European citizen, so you have to be very cautious that there are no records about your residence situation without having a valid permit and without having an ongoing case at migration agency. Because in that situation, you are considered to be illegal immigrant who is staying in Sweden. And that is definitely not okay, because then they can easily issue a deportation order. And if you don't comply with the deportation order, you get an entry ban. And an entry ban is something that believe me, nobody wants to have, because then you are basically banned from the whole Schengen area. And that is definitely something that is going to affect your future and your family's future. So I do not recommend anyone to stay in Sweden without either a valid permit or an ongoing case. So my recommendation to you is to submit an application for a different type of residence permit. If you don't get a job, if you don't find a job meanwhile you're looking for a job, just submit, a self-employment residence permit. And then I'm going to kind of redirect this into the second question, which is what happens if the main applicant and their dependents switch their places migration-wise, for their permits. So let's say you are the main applicant and then you came to Sweden with your wife and your family. So basically, if you lose your job, you yourself, there is no limitations for switching your work permit to become a family member, like a family dependent. However, the one who is the dependent or the family member of the main applicant came to Sweden on your permit. Therefore, in this situation, they have to apply for the residence permit from outside Sweden. This is the general rule. However, as you mentioned, there are some exceptions to this rule. But to be honest, according to my experience, migration agency has been very, very selective. So they rarely give permission to those who have to leave the country and apply again. But there are some exceptions. For example, if someone is expecting a child, or they are severely sick, or there are some situations that makes this person unable to leave the country. So I do not really can recommend whether you would be eligible for these exceptions, but you can always try, because I mean, the worst that can happen is that they will communicate and they will tell you to leave the country until they issue the new residence permit. But you never know. So it could happen, it could not happen. You never know until you try. And about your wife's situation, I believe since if she was a dependent from the first place and she moved to Sweden with you, then she probably needs to make the application from outside as a general rule. But there is no limitations on you becoming her dependent.
Thanks for clarifying on the second one. But I do know a couple of people who actually, as you said, migration agency has been very selective and they allowed them to stay while they switch their work permit from main to dependent. But I also want to take this opportunity to let everyone, maybe if anyone needs this information, that it's our responsibility to inform migration agency about our situation so that they can consider and maybe allow. In the second case, I'm saying in general. Thanks for that. But I would like to remind once again, in the first case, in your case as an immigration lawyer, was there any situation you handled a case or someone reached out to you to process the work permit while they crossed the deadline of 3 months, while they have valid residence permit? The residence permit is not expired, it is still valid. The only thing is they did not find the job in 3 months. They crossed the 3 months deadline, but they found it in the 4th month or something like that. And maybe what happened about the decision or what migration agency said.
It is very difficult to answer because, okay, I didn't have a specific case about a worker who lost his job and then passed these 3 months without getting a work and then got a job after the 4th month. But I had similar cases with the self-employment or students or family members who they had a gap between their work permits and then their second residence permit got affected by it because they had to leave the country no matter how. Since you were illegally in Sweden and there's a gap between your applications, even if you find a job in Sweden, you still have a deportation issue on your hands that you have to take care of it first. So even if you don't leave the country and you secure a job, let's say after 4 months, there is still a deportation order on your case that you have to make sure you comply with it. So you have to leave the country before they issue a new residence permit for you, because there is a gap there, and clearly they won't issue a new residence permit for you, even though if you secure a new job.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for the answers. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Adib.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, should we take another question?
Yeah, sure.
Hey everybody. Hey, thank you for this informative session. My question is regarding this waiting time. I guess you mentioned that the case might be someone who is still waiting for the previous application to get granted, which is my case. And it's like 4 months. I've been waiting for the second 2 years extension. And I laid off from the job. And the question here, actually have 2 questions. The first one is, what is your recommendation about the time I let the migration office know that I'm jobless? Because there is some doubts if they give me those 3 months as an extra to find a job. And if the second question is regarding another type of application, if I'm changing my application to a dependent with my partner, should I, or do you recommend me to apply in advance before the end date of the contract. As I mentioned, because I'm not sure if I would have those 3 months, or do you recommend me to just contact immigration office and ask them if they let me use those 3 months as an extra to find a job, and if not, then I change the application to my partner.
Thank you for your question. May I ask whether you currently are on a valid permit or it's expired?
No, it's already expired, and I'm in the waiting time. But
Okay,
I applied on time, like before this one expired. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. So here's the thing. In these situations, as long as you do not have a rejection decision and you still have an ongoing case on migration agency's website, it basically means that there are no interruptions. So the application process and your residency status has been consistent. So consistency is very important. And as long as you do not have a rejection on your case, you are more than welcome to just register for another type of residence permit. And switching from work permit to family permit is something I do recommend you to do as soon as possible. Just make sure that you have all the documents ready, especially you have to have lived with your partner for at least 6 months, and then you can prove that you have lived like a couple during the time you were together. That is the most important part and the core requirement for this type of residence permit.
Okay, thank you. And what do you think about the extension that if the immigration office allows me to search for a job for more 3 months after the expiry date of the contract?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, if someone had a job and then they are applying for an extension and their case is still ongoing, and meanwhile, if they lose their jobs, unfortunately, they're not allowed to be granted these 3 months as an opportunity to look for another work permit or another job to secure. So I'm afraid that doesn't include your situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, let's see if we have someone else. We have quite a bit of people who want to answer questions. So, Adib, you just let me know when you reach your limit. Okay, we have someone else in the box. Oh, he just somehow it didn't work. Okay, we'll add somebody else. Hi, you're in the box.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the session. I just do quickly so many people can ask questions. So I have a quick question. Like, for example, you have a valid work permit and this is the first work permit. And after 1 year, you decide to change job or you get laid off or you lose the job. And then you have a 3 month legally. And my question is what will happen? Like if you find job and applied within 3 months, but your job starting date is after 3 months. Like you already applied within 3 months, like maybe within 2 months, but your starting date is after 3 months. So that's the question.
Situation, you should normally be allowed to work while you are waiting for your next residence permit. That won't be an issue as long as you had a valid residence permit when you lost your job. You can still, but you have to notify the migration agency about this.
Yeah. So as long as you applied within 3 months for new work permit, so there shouldn't be any problem.
You should normally be allowed to work, but in some situations, depending on like how long you've worked and if
the change of the profession or the employer doesn't significantly change the category of the permit, it would be fine. I do recommend you to contact migration agency about your case, because each company and each industry and each profession has a different category. So contact migration agency and tell them about the employer and the certain type of work you're going to do, to just make sure that you won't do anything wrong. In these situations, we also just contact migration agency and just to make sure that the person does not do anything illegal.
Yeah. Thank you. And one more quick question, as you told that when the visa is on process, you are waiting for decision, but you don't have valid residence permit, or the first work permit is expired. So are you allowed to start business on that category?
You can always start a company and switch to the work permit as a self-employed, as long as you have a valid residence permit or you have an ongoing case at migration agency. If your case is not ongoing, like if you don't have any submitted case on the platform, and if your previous residence permit is expired, then you unfortunately cannot switch to the work permit as a self-employed. And something that is worth mentioning is that if someone switches from work permit as an employee to the self-employed, they still have the opportunity to work on their own company. But if someone is on the self-employed work permit, they cannot work as an employee. So you should always make sure that even if you were granted a work permit as a self-employed, and then you get a job elsewhere, and you want to switch your self-employed work permit to an employee, then you have to wait until you get the residence permit, and you are not allowed to work while you are waiting for a decision. But if you were an employee and you want to start a job as a self-employed, then you're good to go.
Okay, I have last question, and it will be you have to complete 48 months for the PR requirement, like permanent residence. So what will happen, if you complete 48 months and then you lose the job, but you are still waiting for the decision? So will it be considered as PR, or you need to have permanent job on that time?
Yeah, that is very unfortunate. I mean, I've seen cases in that situation. Usually when you here's something that we should clarify. We don't have a separate application for permanent residency. So when someone wants to get a permanent residence permit, it should be accompanied by an extension of a residence permit. So if you do not have a work to extend the residence permit for, then you just do not have the access to the system to check the permanent residence permit application. So residence permit application is an add-on. It's something that you add into the extension residence permit. It's not a separate identical type of residence permit. But my substitution or alternative to this is the EU long residence permit application, which you, as a non-EU citizen, can apply for after 5 years of consistent existence and presence in the European Union, in the country that you have been residing. But the education, like the student time, is not counted.
Yeah, but is it allowed even though you are on process, like the visa is ongoing?
If you so it is, you have to. So there is the rules are silent about this part, whether ongoing processing are also considered, but normally it shouldn't be counted. So because we have, for example, I have seen some cases at court where someone switched their residence permit, and then there was 2-3 days of gap between their residence permits during the span of 5 years. And then that was not counted as eligible because there were like 2-3 gaps in between, and it was considered to not be consistent. But let's say that you apply for, let's say you have 4 years of work permit as an employee, and then you apply for a self-employed residence permit when you lose your job upon the 4th year. And then we consider the 5th year as a self-employed. If you later in the future be granted a residence permit as a self-employed, then you can apply for the long residence permit for the European Union long residency, because then you have 4 years as an employee and 1 year as a self-employed, but you have to wait until you receive the self-employed residence permit. And then when you fulfill the 5 years, you can apply for the long residence permit.
Yeah, thanks for the answer. I think one more information will help others, or it's unique at least for me. They already opened a PR case. I did not apply or anything. So when I log into my account, I can see that they opened a PR case automatically. So is that counted if they work on the PR one or the work permit one? I don't know which one they're gonna check.
So you fulfilled all the 4 years, right?
Yeah.
There is a chance for the permanent, but it depends on the approach of the case officer and the specific situations and facts of the case. This needs a bit further evaluation. I would say it's not easy to say right now. I have to take a look into the case. Yeah, you can always reach out, and then we can talk about the details about your own application.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Are you okay to take just a couple more? Maybe like 1 or 2 more?
Yeah, we can take 2 more.
Okay, I know we had Yaroslav was waiting and then he got kicked out when it was his time, so I'm going to add him in. Hi, you're in the box.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I know that you already touched this topic, but after losing the job, these 3 months, how strict this time frame rule cannot be negotiable? Like, can you, for example, apply for extension from 1 extra month or 2 months? Like, is it the case or not?
I'm afraid at the moment we do not have a mechanism of negotiating the 3 months.
I didn't get. Is it yes or not?
No, we don't. Did you mean that we extend these 3 months, or did I?
Yeah. Like to have some months extra.
No, I don't think if we have such a mechanism. No.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. One more.
Animalize in the box. Nice to see you.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for taking me.
Yeah, absolutely. How can I help you?
Yes, I just have a few questions on probably not exactly the job loss, but more or less regarding that. But I always keep about hearing about from my friends working in the EU about EU Blue Card. What is the equivalent of EU Blue Card in Sweden, or does it exist or doesn't exist at all?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, right now we have a proposal that is going to be enforced in the future regarding the EU Blue Card situations, where it gives the workers an easier time getting the EU Blue Card. I'm afraid the requirements for the EU Blue Card in Sweden are stricter than, I don't know, like Germany or other countries. But we have the Blue Card in Sweden, but I would say it is not something that gives like an extra privilege to the holder rather than the normal type of work permit. It has its own perks when it comes to you moving to other countries in the European Union. However, the requirements are very high But soon, the good news is that soon it's going to change and it's going to be a bit easier for those who want to get the blue card. But we have the concept of EU blue card. It's just not something that you come across every day.
Yeah, that is correct, because I have never heard any of my friends getting an EU blue card in Sweden, but most have from Germany. So probably you're right, in Germany it's easy to get it.
Yes, exactly. In Germany, it's very common for those who want to get like an EU blue card. It's very common. I'm afraid it's not like that in Sweden, but we have the blue card as a part of the EU regulations, so that's not an issue.
Got it. And my second question is probably, not regarding again for job loss, but let's say a person has a work permit in Sweden. He is working as an employee in a good company. There's no job loss, but they do get consulting offers on LinkedIn for a weekend job or something. Then can they open a company simultaneously? Because the work permit rules says the first work permit, you're only stick with the current company.
Yes.
So the question is, on the first work permit, can they open a company on their name, like Enskil Firma or Aktiebolag, and start taking that consulting job, or that is not correct as per the law?
So basically, it is very interesting, because if your residence permit is based on employment, so you're employed by a worker, if you're employed by an employer like a company, you do not have any restrictions on having your own company. So you can always register your own company and work alongside your work. But if you have a self-employed residence permit, you are not allowed to work for another employer. However, what is interesting to know is that depending on the type of contract you signed with your employer, if there are any terms or conditions in the contract that kind of restricts or impedes you from like a non-competing clause there. So if you're not competing with the employer, or if the type of contract you have signed doesn't have a clause for non-competing, then you're good to go. You can work with that. Or if it's a different type of activity, then you're also still good to go. Register.
Yeah, that is quite. I'm not really concerned about the company, because that we can talk with the HR. But I'm still a little bit thinking about the work permit rules, where it says the first work permit, you're tied to your employer for the first 2 years, and you can only work 100% or something, right? That is when I'm still thinking, if you take a new consulting role on the weekends or for extra hours, then probably you're working more than 100%. You're having an extra salary, and probably, you are working in a company. So I'm still really just thinking, is this correct or not?
No, the limitation for that you're tied to your first employer has nothing to do with the salary. It's more about the fact that the person must fulfill the first 2 years until they can switch their residence permit. So the fact that you can work for yourself, like having your own company, is something separate from the main residence permit that you have. So when you change your employer, it means that you're changing the basis of your residence permit as a work permit holder. But when you have a company for yourself as a consultant, it does not change the basis of your work permit or residence permit in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at it the other way. Yeah.
Correct. Then I will not take much of your guys' time, so probably other people can ask questions. But thanks to both of you for hosting the right session, the right time. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can always email or directly come to me and ask your questions. We would be more than happy to help you.
We will meet sometimes in Gothenburg.
Sorry?
We will meet sometimes in Gothenburg, I said.
Oh, absolutely. You're more than welcome to come to the office.
Yeah, sure, man.
Okay, I think we're kind of reaching the end of the event. We've been going for about 2 hours now. So I think, Adib, did you want to go ahead and start to close it down?
Yeah, I think... Could you mute me? Thank you. Thank you for all the great questions. I really had a great time here answering your questions and covering all the issues you faced. I'm afraid, unfortunately, immigration questions are something that we can talk about for even months or years. But you're always welcome to directly reach out to me if you want to get help with your applications, if you have questions, if you need consultation sessions. You're more than welcome to directly text me on LinkedIn or reach out through my email. And I want to thank Amanda for this opportunity to hold this. It's great time. It's such a hectic situation for many people who have been affected by these circumstances in Sweden. Hopefully, we can find good solutions for you in the future. I do believe that there are some parts that could be revised and reviewed, especially regarding the 3 months opportunity to work to look for a new work or switching your residence permit. But hopefully we can come back with great news in the near future for you. And for now, we can only answer the questions with the tools that we have at the moment. But in the future, nobody knows what the future holds. So please feel free to reach out to me or to Amanda whenever you have any questions, and I would be more than happy to help. And thank you again for participating in this live. And I want to thank everyone, especially thank Amanda for this time. And it's been great to talk here and be at your service.
Yeah, and thank you for spending your time to teach all of us the expertise that you have. I know that there are some people who wanted to ask questions. Unfortunately, we're just sort of running out of time. So those of you who are in the speaker box or want to know more, as Adib said, just go ahead and send him a private message. I also posted a comment recently on the event page with the actual link. So if you want to just go directly to the link to book like a 15-minute consultation with him, that's there as well. But again, thank you, Adib, for joining us and all of you who are listening. This will be recorded and put on the YouTube channel within about a week. So if you missed some of it, you can go ahead and check it out there. So with that being said, I just want to say good night, everybody.
Thank you again. Good night.